Welcome to you wherever you are in the world. We're streaming across the globe, coming to you from the Royal Botanic Gardens in London, where Q scientists work with partners in over 100 countries at the forefront of ecosystem restoration. By tuning in, you've made the first step to joining a global movement to revive our planet over the next 10 years. With this event, we celebrate the official start of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, which runs from 2021 through 2030. But what does ecosystem restoration really mean? Why is it needed? And what will countries, companies, leaders from science, arts, media and activism do to realise the vision of going from exploiting the planet to healing it? And of course, we can all play our part. It's not for me to say, let's hear from them. Let's learn about the national and international commitments, the latest from science and movement builders. And be sure to stay tuned for exclusive musical performances and never before seen footage from the field. We'll have a brand new song by Don Diablo and Dolla, especially for Generation Restoration. The United Nations General Assembly has proclaimed this UN decade following a proposal for action by an unusually broad coalition of countries from across continents and regions. A fact that proves how vital ecosystem restoration is across political and regional lines. It's a UN initiative at the highest level. We know that healthy ecosystems provide the basis for the achievement of our Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. I'm honoured to now give the floor to His Excellency the United Nations Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres.
We are rapidly reaching the point of no return for the planet. We face a triple environmental emergency: biodiversity loss, climate disruption, and escalating pollution. For too long, humanity has cut down the Earth's forests, polluted its rivers and oceans, and ploughed its grasslands into oblivion. We are ravaging the very ecosystems that underpin our societies, and in doing so, we risk depriving ourselves of the food, water, and resources we need to survive. The degradation of the natural world is already undermining the well-being of 3.2 billion people, or 40% of humanity. Luckily, the Earth is resilient, but she needs our help. We still have time to reverse the damage we have done. That is why, on this World Environment Day, we are launching the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. This global movement will bring together governments, businesses, and civil society and private citizens in an unprecedented effort to heal the Earth. By restoring ecosystems, we can drive a transformation that will contribute to the achievement of all the Sustainable Development Goals. The task is monumental. We need to replant and protect our forests. We need to clean up our rivers and seas. And we need to green our cities. Accomplishing these things will not only safeguard the planet's resources, it will create millions of new jobs by 2030, generate returns of over $7 trillion every year, and help eliminate poverty and hunger. The United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is a global call to action. It will draw together political support, scientific research, and financial muscle to massively scale up restoration. And everyone can contribute. Science tells us these next 10 years are our final chance to avert a climate catastrophe, turn back the deadly tide of pollution, and end species loss. Today, let's start a new decade, one in which we finally make peace with nature and secure a better future for all.
When declaring the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, the UN General Assembly decided to dedicate a whole 10 years to this massive project of healing the planet. Two agencies were called to lead this endeavour together: the UN Environment Programme, UNEP, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, FAO. But really, how do we even start to take such a gigantic task? Ecosystem restoration is really so enormous and cross-cutting. Let's give the floor to Inga Andersen, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, to find out more.
We at Unep, along with FAO and partners, are so proud to kickstart the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, to reimagine, to recreate, and to restore the ecosystems on which all life depends. The science is clear. We have 1 decade to address climate change, to end biodiversity loss, and to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So how do we use this moment in history to launch a massive movement to save our terrestrial and marine ecosystems, even as we continue to decarbonize? We have several to-do items here. Governments must ensure COVID-19 stimulus packages contribute to a sustainable and equitable recovery from the pandemic. Businesses and the financial sector must reform operations and financial flows so that they restore and not destroy the natural world. And new research from Unep and partners has revealed that finance flows for nature-based solutions must triple by 2030. As individuals and consumers, rethink your choices, demand deforestation-free products, vote for sustainability in the polling booth, and raise your voice loud and clear. So join us as we launch this important global movement. We don't have a minute to lose.
I feel so inspired by all the leaders and activists we've heard from. Stay tuned for more energising conversations and musical performances to come, including Gisele Bundchen entering a deep dive on restoration with ecologist John D. Liu. When we speak about restoration, we mean reviving all ecosystems, wild nature, as well as the ecosystems that we rely on for producing food and other resources for our survival. This is why the UN Environment Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN are working hand in hand to make this decade a success. I'm honoured to introduce a message by the Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Dongyu.
As the world moves to the recovery from the pandemic, healthy ecosystems are more vital than ever. They are our lifeline for the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. But pressure on the natural resources continues to increase, affecting the well-being of 3.2 billion people, 40% of the global population, and fueling poverty and food insecurity. Business as usual is not an option. We need to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems worldwide, including our farmland and forests, our rivers and oceans. More efficient, and inclusive, resilient, and sustainable ecosystems can help restore ecosystems and safeguard sustainable food production, leaving no one behind. FAO is proud to co-lead the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Let us join forces to restore ecosystems and recite our relationships with nature by showing it the relevance it deserves, while ensuring better production, better nutrition, better environment, and a better life for all.
Now, you won't want to miss the surprises we've got in store for you throughout the evening, so stay tuned. Dr. Jane Goodall, Gisele Bundchen, Rocky Daouni, Don Diablo, Dolla, to name just a few. Restoration is ultimately a question of faith. Do we all believe that a better future is possible? I am extremely honoured to now introduce a message by His Holiness Pope Francis.
I have the honor to read the message which the Holy Father addressed on 27th May last to Her Excellency Mrs. Inger Andersen, United Nations Environment Program Executive Director, and to His Excellency Mr. Dongyu, Food and Agriculture Organization Director General, for the launch of the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. Your Excellencies, this decade invites us to make 10-year commitments aimed at caring for our common home by supporting and scaling up efforts to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems worldwide, and raise awareness of the importance of successful ecosystem restoration. In the Bible, we read that the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of His hands. Day after day, they pour forth speech. Night after night, they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words. No sound is heard from them. We are all part of this gift of creation. We are a part of nature, not separated from it. This is what the Bible tells us. The current environmental situation calls us to act now with urgency, to become ever more responsible stewards of creation, and to restore the nature that we have been damaging and exploiting for too long. Otherwise, we risk destroying the very basis on which we depend. We risk floods and hunger and severe consequences for ourselves and for the future generations. This is what many scientists tell us. We need to take care of each other and of the weakest among us. Continuing down this path of exploitation and destruction of humans and of nature is unjust and unwise. We have a responsibility to leave a habitable common home for our children and for future generations. However, we are warned that we have little time left. Scientists say the next 10 years, the span of this UN decade, to restore the ecosystem, which will mean the integral restoration of our relation with nature. The many warnings we are experiencing, among which we can see COVID-19 and global warming, are pushing us to take urgent action. Restoring the nature we have damaged means, in the first place, restoring ourselves. As we welcome the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, let us be compassionate, creative, and courageous. May we take our proper place as a restoration generation.
Restoration can only work if we all come together, and religious and spiritual leaders of all faiths are so important to this cause. We are delighted that across the world, faith communities are already working together to heal Earth. Let's hear a message now from the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar Mosque, His Eminence, Ahmed El-Tayeb.
أيها الحفل الكريم، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. وبعد، أردت أن أسمعكم صوت الدين في هذه الأزمة، أو إن شئتم في هذه الكارثة التي لو ترك أمرها للعابثين بنعم الله على أرضه وفضائه فإن أحدا لن ينجو من آثارها المدمرة، لا في الغرب ولا في الشرق، على أن علاقة الإنسان بالكون في فلسفة الأديان الإلهية هي علاقة حب متبادل، وأن الإنسان كائن أرضي خلقا ونشأة، ثم عودة إلى هذه الأرض في نهاية رحلته على ظهرها. وخطاب الله للمؤمنين في هذه القضية واضح في القرآن الكريم: منها خلقناكم وفيها نعيدكم ومنها نخرجكم تارة أخرى. والصحيح أن علاقة الإنسان هي علاقة مسؤولية ومبادئ وأخلاق، والذي يتدبر الآيات القرآنية التي تؤكد على أن الله تعالى أتقن صنع كل شيء وأحسنه غاية ما يكون الإحسان يستشعر مسؤولية كبرى تجاه هذا الكون المنسق الجميل، وشعورا دافقا يشبه شعور الطفل نحو أمه الحنون، وما ذاك إلا لأن الأرض هي أم ثانية للإنسان. من هنا حذر الدين المؤمنين به من الفساد في الأرض: ولا تفسدوا في الأرض بعد إصلاحها، ونبه على أن أي إنسان ليس حرا في أن يفسد في الأرض أو يعيث فيها فسادا، لا على ظهرها ولا في جوها ولا في هوائها أو مائها أو حيواناتها، فالطبيعة بكل عناصرها ومواردها هي ملك لله تعالى وحده، ولا يحل لإنسان أن يتعامل معها إلا في إطار إصلاحها كأمانة اؤتمن عليها أمام ضميره وأمام ربه. هو أن الله تعالى لما جعل الماء هو أصل الحياة على اختلاف أنواعها خص نفسه سبحانه بتفرده بملكيته وبإنزاله من السماء إلى الأرض وجعله حقا مشتركا بين عباده، وأن أحدا من عباده لم يصنع منه قطرة واحدة حتى تكون له شبهة تملك تخوله حق التصرف المالك في ملكه، يمنحه من يشاء ويصرفه عمن يشاء، وتحرم قتل الحيوان إلا لضرورة الأكل وعلى قدرها فقط، وتحرم قلع الزروع أو حرقها، وبخاصة حرق النخيل. وقد تعجبون حين تسمعون أنها أيضا تحرم تفريق النحل وقتله أو إغراقه. شكرا لحسن استماعكم، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
We can only achieve our restoration goals if we come together, hearts and minds, communicating the value of our ecosystems and why we need to bring them back can sometimes seem hard in a world where we are up against multiple crises. COVID-19 still has us in its grips. Across the world, more than 80 million people are fleeing their homes, driven by wars and hunger. We're up against so much, it can feel overwhelming. How do we still keep hope that a better world is possible and spread that message to others? Let's listen in on a discussion between two people who are each driving restoration forward in their own way. Unep Goodwill Ambassador, supermodel, best-selling author and philanthropist Gisele Bundchen, and John D. Liu, ecologist and filmmaker, who's been directly involved in one of the biggest restoration efforts ever, bringing back the Loess Plateau in China, the cradle of ancient Chinese civilization.
Hi, John. So nice to be here with you. I wish we could be in person, but I'm so happy we can be together and talking about something so important, which is the restoration of our beautiful planet. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure and an honor to get to meet you and to have a conversation. Thanks very much.
So, John, how was your transition? I know you were a journalist, so from being a journalist to ecology, how did that shift? How did that change happen?
I was working for CBS News for about a decade, but then when the World Bank asked me to go out and to document the cradle of Chinese civilization, I looked at that and I thought, oh my goodness, this is actually more important than the political and economic things I'd been covering before, because they were all dependent on a functional ecosystem. And the ecosystems were being destroyed by the choices that were being made politically and economically. And when I saw that, I thought, well, I have to spend the rest of my life understanding how this works and sharing whatever I can learn with anybody who's interested, that this would be more valuable, more interesting. And it has turned out that way. It's much more valuable. Nobody remembers, Brezhnev or Deng Xiaoping, or really, Ronald Reagan hasn't come up into conversations much lately. But everything that I've done about studying ecology is now in universities and schools all around the world. And it's not about me, it's about we.
Yeah.
That we can restore the earth. Humanity can do it, but I can only do my part.
Yeah. And I think that we is what we're here to ignite that fire on we, so we can really create a beautiful world, because I believe that that's, with everyone working towards that same goal, that's how we're going to make it happen. I have been working on environmental causes since, for 20 years too, since the first time I visited the Amazon and realized what was going on there. And I was like, I have to do something. I can't just sit here. Where I grew up, we always had really clean water. I come from a village of, 17,000 people in the south of Brazil. And it was very sad to me that, a few years later, I realized that water was being contaminated because, the springs where the springs were, there were pesticides and cattle and all erosion and all that stuff. So the springs, which is the source of the water for the city, were being contaminated. And I was like, we have to do something about it. And it was incredible. And that in fact happened. We were able to do that. And I'm so happy that 13 years later, we go back there. Not only we have clean water, but we have an incredible biological corridor and everything. Everything, life flourished, right? So
yes, I think that we have to have mass participation.
Do you feel it's possible, given all the destruction that we are seeing in our world, for ecosystems to fully recover?
Well, I don't think that ecosystems want to be degraded. I think that their natural evolutionary succession is to increase biodiversity, increase biomass, and increase the accumulation of organic matter. So it's really been human beings who have disrupted these things. And so it depends on our intention. If our intention is to protect and restore biodiversity, biomass, and accumulated organic matter, I don't think we can fail. And we have to work together as a species on a planetary scale.
I couldn't agree more with you. We are going to have an impact in the world. We all are going to have one. We just have to decide what kind of impact we want to have, right?
These natural systems are more valuable than anything else that exists on the planet. It's more valuable than products or cars or anything that we can imagine. With people who, like you, who are famous and have many, many followers, what do you think it's possible for celebrities or entertainers to do to help?
It's about learning and really understanding the magnitude and the importance of this issue, right? And I think then once you learn and you understand the really how vital is to take care of our natures. Because ultimately our life depends on it, right? It's like our health depends on the health of our planet. It's that simple. And I think at that point, when you really understand that, is using everyone using their platforms to help bring the awareness and help give visibility to the cause. But I think really the most important thing is always to, once you learn, you cannot unlearn, right? So is lead by example. I think that's like, you cannot say one thing and do something else. So it's like leading by example. Like, what are you doing with your life? Like, if everyone said, I'm going to do something, whatever that is, no initiative I think is too small. It's just deciding, I want to do something, and then go out there and do it.
One of the things that I came to feel was that it's possible to restore the degraded lands on the earth, but it's not possible for me as an individual to do it. What the United Nations Environment Program is talking about is that this decade is not only just a being designated as the decade of ecosystem restoration, but it's an urgent need that in this decade we have a huge opportunity to make massive changes.
Well, I love that dream.
Yeah, it's
and I love to see that dream become a reality, which already has become a reality and is now keep expanding. And I think we all can do our part and hopefully inspire as many people as possible, so our we can become a big we, right?
Well, it's been a wonderful time to have this conversation with you, Gisele. Thank you so much for your time and for your energy and for all that you do for the planet.
Oh, thank you so much. It was awesome. I could be here talking with you for another 5 hours. I think there is a wonderful, there's so many wonderful things we can do together. And I'm with you. I believe in we. And I'm ready to get to work. So let's do it. Nice talking with you. And thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
Pakistan is this year's host of World Environment Day, which is fully focused on ecosystem restoration. But the country has been a leader in restoration for many years, even including measures for simultaneously reviving nature and the economy in their post-COVID-19 recovery package. I'm pleased to give the floor to His Excellency Prime Minister Imran Khan of Pakistan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It gives me great pleasure today to plant our 1,000th tree. This is part of the United Nations Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. This is Pakistan's contribution. Today we've completed our 1 billion trees. Our target is 10 billion trees. We also have started another ambitious program of increasing our national parks. So we have now increased 9 national parks, adding to our 30-odd parks which had been existing in the past 70 years. The idea is by adding to our national parks that we increase our tree cover, we protect our wildlife. A lot of our wildlife had been diminishing over the years because of lack of habitat. Also, we are increasing our mangrove cover. And mangroves, as we all know, they conserve the greatest amount of oxygen. They release the greatest amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. And finally, what we want to do is also to restore our wetlands. And by using our floodwaters, we hope to restore our wetlands and at the same time raise the water level, the aquifer, replenish the aquifer water tables that have been going down. We also hope in the process to create green jobs, employ women and youth in planting the trees. During the coronavirus, we managed to give 80,000 green jobs to our people, saving them from the unemployment that followed the lockdowns because of the coronavirus. And so we enabled our youth to have jobs, and especially women in remote areas where they grow nurseries. Finally, I would like to appeal to the world community that we all need to protect our ecosystems. We need to protect our environment. The rapidly depleting tree cover and degradation of our environment needs to be stopped. It's time that the world comes together to save the environment for our coming generations.
This UN decade is really a collective effort driven by a broad coalition of countries coming together for the cause. Germany has been among this group of countries calling for and supporting the establishment of this UN decade on ecosystem restoration. Germany is now also among the first group of donors actively supporting this global movement. It is my pleasure to invite Her Excellency, Germany's Chancellor, Angela Merkel, in welcoming this decade.
Sehr geehrter Herr Generalsekretär, lieber Antonio Guterres, sehr geehrter Premierminister Imran Khan, Eure Heiligkeit Papst Franziskus, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren. Heute ist Weltumwelttag, ein symbolträchtiger und damit ausgezeichneter Tag für den Startschuss der UN-Dekade zur Wiederherstellung von Ökosystemen. Weltweit arbeiten wir im Rahmen der Rio-Konventionen am Erhalt der Natur. Aber wir handeln noch zu wenig entschlossen. Wir müssen mehr tun, um natürliche Lebensräume zu schützen und wiederherzustellen. Und zwar nicht irgendwann, sondern jetzt. Jetzt gilt es dafür zu sorgen, dass großräumig Wasserkreisläufe funktionieren, Landschaften nicht austrocknen und Landwirtschaft unser aller Ernährung sichern kann. Wir müssen jetzt dafür sorgen, Wälder, die wir nicht zuletzt als Klimaregulatoren brauchen, zu schützen und wieder aufzuforsten. Und wir müssen jetzt Lebensräume für Pflanzen und Tiere wiederherstellen und besser vernetzen. Das hilft auch, die Gefahr der Übertragung von Zoonosen wie Covid-19 zu verringern. Angesichts all dessen braucht es eine echte globale Partnerschaft. Deutschland unterstützt daher die UN-Dekade zur Wiederherstellung von Ökosystemen und die Arbeit des Umweltprogramms Unep sowie der Ernährungs- und Landwirtschaftsorganisation der Vereinten Nationen FAO. Ich freue mich, dass wir als erstes Land dem Treuhandfonds für diese Dekade Mittel in Höhe von 14 Millionen Euro zur Verfügung stellen. Herr Premierminister Imran, Ihr ambitioniertes Baumpflanzprogramm ist ein wichtiger Beitrag zum nationalen und globalen Umweltschutz und ganz im Sinne der Dekade. Für die Ausrichtung dieses Weltumwelttages danke ich Ihnen sehr. Ich wünsche mir, dass wir, wenn wir im Jahr 2030 auf den heutigen Start der Dekade zurückblicken, sagen können, es war ein Aufbruch zu einem echten Wandel. Einem Wandel, mit dem wir mehr Lebensräume für eine lebenswerte Zukunft gewonnen haben. Vielen Dank.
Restoration is a global issue, but where precisely is it happening? What are the places where actions are already planned? The flagship report laying the scientific basis for the UN decade, Becoming Generation Restoration, has just been published a few days ago. Check it out online. Now, the report shows that promises by countries to restore land and coastal areas now comes up to 1 billion hectares. That's an area larger than China. And over half of these commitments have been made by countries in Africa. Let's hear it from the continent that has long been advocating for the restoration agenda.
Au nom de l'Afrique, je salue avec enthousiasme l'initiative des Nations Unies de déclarer la période 2021-2030 décennie de la restauration des écosystèmes. Avec les études récentes qui démontrent la régression de la totalité des écosystèmes du monde, l'Afrique, reconnue comme le continent qui regorge de la plus grande diversité en biomes et espèces, mais aussi de fortes étendues de terres dégradées, s'est engagée dans le grand chantier de la muraille verte et également dans la coalition Afrique 100, par laquelle le continent se propose de restaurer 100 millions d'hectares de terres dégradées. L'Afrique centrale et l'Afrique en général ont multiplié les engagements à travers plusieurs déclarations régionales, des promesses, des appels à l'action et des activités de terrain. Il nous faut mobiliser des ressources nécessaires et de l'expertise pour diriger une mise en œuvre à grande échelle pour répondre aux défis de Bonn et contribuer ainsi au développement et à la préservation de la biodiversité ainsi que de la lutte contre les changements climatiques. La République démocratique du Congo, l'un des plus grands pays du continent, entend également faire sa part et s'est engagé à restaurer 8 millions d'hectares de savanes et de forêts dégradées en vue de contribuer aux défis de Bonn, la restauration des écosystèmes des forêts sèches de Miombo, ainsi que des écosystèmes montagneux de l'Est du pays. L'éruption récente du Nyiragongo, intervenue ce 22 mai dernier, nous rappelle non seulement que la nature a ses droits, mais aussi et surtout qu'une mauvaise planification de l'usage des espaces expose nos populations aux impacts des catastrophes naturelles et que la restauration des écosystèmes après de telles catastrophes doit se faire dans le respect des équilibres naturels. Ainsi, la restauration des écosystèmes tant terrestres que marins et lacustres devrait se faire de sorte à éviter de créer des conflits fonciers ou des conflits d'usage et doit donc s'inscrire dans des processus d'aménagement des espaces visionnaires qui tiennent compte des arbitrages intersectoriels respectueux des droits de tenure foncière et forestière des communautés locales et d'autres groupes sociaux vulnérables. De même, la solution basée sur la nature offre des bénéfices en termes d'atténuation des gaz à effet de serre, renforce la résilience, préserve la biodiversité et améliore la qualité de vie de nos citoyens. Le lancement ce jour de la décennie de la restauration des écosystèmes démontre clairement la convergence indiscutable des agendas climat, biodiversité et lutte contre la désertification et donc la nécessité de promouvoir actuellement les synergies entre ces agendas et de leur financement. En conclusion, je peux vous assurer que l'Afrique entend d'abord préserver son capital naturel tout en partageant l'ambition des Nations Unies de restaurer tous les écosystèmes afin de faire face aux défis du changement climatique en vue de préparer ainsi un avenir meilleur pour les générations futures.
During this event, we're going to have a series of special exchanges, our Generation Restoration Dialogues. In each one, a young mover and shaker will pose questions or challenges to world leaders on some of the most important issues we're facing today. But let's remember, Generation Restoration is not about age. Everyone alive right now is part of Generation Restoration. Everyone on this planet, and that includes you, can make a critical difference. So what do young and experienced leaders have to say on climate change? Let's hear what UNEP's Goodwill Ambassador in Thailand, actor Alex Rendell, and the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Patricia Espinosa, think about this.
I am an actor and also an environmental educator. We are all so many things, and surely we want to leave this planet in a better state than what it was for the next generation. When I take kids diving or hiking or trekking, I can see how the planet really inspires them. But at the same time, I can feel that the newer generation are quite anxious about their future, whether it's about climate issues, economic issues, or even the pandemic that we are going through. Personally, I believe in hope. Protecting the precious ecosystem that we have lost or restoring what we have damaged may be our only way out to solve the crisis we are going through. And this is why I have been involved in environmental conservation and have been fighting for almost 10 years now. But my question to you is, what can restoration do for climate action, and how can we ensure that it is happening for the next 10 years?
Thank you, Alex. I am pleased to be part of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration launch. I am happy to see your emphasis on hope and working with youth. Efforts to address climate change must leave no voice behind. Women, the poor, disabled people, local communities, and indigenous peoples bear the brunt of the climate crisis. We must ensure they are included both in terms of participating and leading. As you know, our forests are under siege. Each year, an average of 122 million hectares of forests are affected by fires, pests, diseases, invasive species, drought, and adverse weather events. Each year, 75 billion tons of fertile soil are lost to land degradation, and 12 million hectares of land are lost to desertification and drought. These events are among the many drivers of ecosystem destruction, species extinction, threats to human health and food security. Stopping the damage is not enough. We need to restore our ecosystems. Restoration enhances the resilience of ecosystems to climate impacts. Restoration has considerable mitigation potential, as well by sequestering carbon in trees, shrubs, and soils. It is also important for people as it restores ecosystem functions essential for livelihoods. For example, we know land and ecosystem restoration strengthens nature and builds food security and resilience. Nature-based solutions that conserve biodiversity can curb emissions, help transform food systems, and build adaptation and resilience. Mitigation of and adaptation to climate change ensures a healthy biodiversity and protects land from further degradation. The next 10 years, beginning now, must be a decade of unified action. We must achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We must move the Paris Climate Agreement from adoption to implementation. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework must be adopted, and the decade of ecosystem restoration must achieve its goals to prevent, halt, and reverse the degradation of ecosystems on every continent and in every ocean. Alex, you mentioned the younger generation is anxious about climate change and the pandemic. Involvement in restoration allows younger people to help their communities on both matters. The world can and must come together to make restoration an integral part of sustainability and is something that must be addressed at major events and summits the rest of the year. Restoration must become an integral part of building forward from COVID-19. It's an opportunity to unlock large-scale investments in forest conservation and ecosystem restoration. And we must ensure the trillions that have been spent and will be spent on the pandemic recovery are aligned with the Paris Agreement. This must be part of November's COP26 results. By responding proactively right now to the climate change emergency, including restoring our land resources, we will reduce numerous future risks to humanity and ecosystems. Thank you, Alex, for giving me time to answer your questions about restoration and climate change.
There have been many countries and regions actively working on this vision to repair our shared planet in the next 10 years. It's an ambitious goal, and the devil lies in the detail. How do you actually get it done? Latin America and the Caribbean has been the first region to actually develop a strategy for making the next 10 years a success. I'm honoured to give the floor to the Prime Minister of Barbados, Her Excellency Mia Mottley.
My dear friends and colleagues, the scourge of COVID-19 regrettably is still upon us. A new year, 2021, has begun, but unfortunately our challenges as a small island developing state have continued. In the commemoration of this decade of ecosystem restoration, what is the message we would wish to resonate in the hearts and minds both of our citizens and indeed the world at large? It is green economic recovery. It is green inclusive recovery. And by green inclusive economic recovery, I'm speaking of an economic recovery strategy which focuses on ultimately improving one's well-being, bringing about social equality while reducing environmental risk and ecological scarcities. As a region, the Ministers of Environment of Latin America and the Caribbean sent a very strong message earlier this year in February, where a decision was adopted that called for a 10-year focus on restoring ecosystems across our region. Barbados supports wholeheartedly this decision, not just to restore in our separate spaces, but to establish a network of restored ecosystems all across Latin America and the Caribbean. Our national efforts include, but are not limited to, ecosystem-based measures of adaptation to and mitigation of climate change, such that they are enshrined into national policy through, in our case, our Roofs to Reefs program. Ecosystem-based measures are also characterized in our 1 million national tree planting project and our national beautification project, our Clean and Green initiative, all three critical to the work of my government. We have significantly expanded the workforce to give these programs life while recognizing that we've had to expand the time frame for the tree planting project because of the pandemic. Development of restoration and management plans for sensitive and/or threatened ecosystems, forests, wetlands, or a marine area. And of course, North-South and South-South cooperation agreements in the areas of technical cooperation, information transfer, and financial resources. This decade of ecosystem restoration is therefore critical, my friends, not only to the conservation and management of biodiversity and land resources, but also in the upkeep of national assets, which will assist countries in combating the threats posed by the climate crisis. I want to thank you for the opportunity to lend my voice to this most important launch event. It is important that Barbados works in solidarity with countries across the world as we all seek to build forward better. Yes, build forward better. Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us for this incredible launch programme. It is the reality of our virtual world that I, of course, can't see what you're doing right now. I can only assume it, but I guess you're all sitting. Do you feel like dancing though? Or at least swaying? Nodding your head to the beat? Well, if you don't yet, you just might in a moment. Let's give it up for Rocky Dawouni, Unep Goodwill Ambassador, international music star, producer and activist coming to us from Ghana.
My name is Rocky Dawouni, and today we are here to celebrate. We are here to celebrate World Environment Day. We are also here to celebrate the beginning of a new decade, a decade of restoration. And what other way to celebrate this than to use the power of music? The power of music has the ability to bring us all together and focus us on an important thing, and that is restoring our earth. Right now, there's so much going on. Our earth is suffering. There's so many problems, but we know that there is nothing above our collective will. And today, as we gather here, I want to appeal to all of you that today is the beginning of a new time. Today is the beginning of a time that we go out there and heal this earth. Today is when we make a pledge that our collective, all of us, are going to shine a beacon of light that all generations shall follow. This song I'm playing is a song that is celebrating. It's a song from Africa, and it's meant for all of us to stand together and know that the future is bright together. This song is called Afro Roots Vibration.
They play. Some people too, they talk me, say, I for no change, I for just make a Africa. So everything we go they do from now, he be the way Yes, now Afro root. He be the new sound wave with the take and control African radio. We no go fit dey follow other people them music, because we get our own vibration. Because we get our own vibration. Because we get our own vibration. Afro roots vibration. He be the music that people say that they want. I be the new sensation. He be not so way that people won't make we play. Our time don't come, so make we sabi say our culture be our power. So make we go back, then go carry our forefathers the music. So we go take high life music, then we go on reggae music. We go take Afro beat. Now so where we go they do la 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 la. He be so we for them every day. Afro roots now. He be so we for them every day. Afro roots. Oh, he be so we for them every day. Afro roots. Right from Africa, people, you hear the feeling right now, you know? Everybody go dey talk say Afro roots. 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 I say everybody go dey talk Afro roots. Hey, everybody go dey talk Afro roots. Everybody go dey sing Afro roots. Everybody go dey talk Afro roots. Oh, everybody go dey talk Afro roots. Everybody go dey sing Afro roots. Everybody go dey talk Afro roots. Everybody go dey sing Afro roots. Everybody go dey talk. Everybody go dey sing. Everybody go dey talk. Go dey talk.
So let us all remember that change does not only happen from the top down. Change also happens from the bottom up. Change happens from within us, and change happens from all around us. And as musicians too, we have a very important and critical role to be at the forefront of this change. So I'm also appealing to all my musician friends, all voices around the world, that this is a movement, and it's not a movement of one, it's a movement of all. So wake up wherever you are, stand up wherever you are, lift your hands up wherever you are, and let's be that change.
Restoration is really not an environmental topic, it's about people and our common future on this planet. The Earth is what we all have in common. In order to make this decade a success, we need to think beyond the lines of different sectors and areas of work. So I'm very happy to now welcome a joint message in support of this common goal of restoration by Denmark's Minister for the Environment, Lea Wermelin, and her colleague, the Minister for Development Cooperation, Flemming Møller Mortensen.
The last year and a half has taught us that the health of our planet impacts with health of humanity. If we act now, implement nature-based solutions, and restore ecosystems, we can change the course of climate change. We can fight poverty, improve food security, and the lives of people. Too much nature is degraded with each passing day. The time is now to stop exploiting our planet and to start restoring it. That's why Denmark looks forward to supporting the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, to protect our forests, clean up our oceans, and change our consumption patterns.
We need to restore and heal nature and unleash its power and potential to tackle the many challenges facing us. The Sustainable Development Goals are unlikely to be met unless ecosystem degradation is stopped and ecosystem restoration is undertaken at an immense scale. Denmark looks forward to supporting the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration because the decade aims to bring our relationship with nature on a new and better track, not only towards 2030, but for decades and even centuries to come.
Let's make peace with nature.
Droughts and degradation of our soils are serious issues. Land degradation is now affecting 3.2 billion people. That's 40% of all humanity. We need to revive our soils to make sure people can grow nutritious foods and to ensure strong economies for generations to come. I'm really happy to present this special Generation Restoration Dialogue, where young South African artist Romario Valentine gets to share his passion for creating environmental awareness with the Executive Secretary of the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, Ibrahim Chow.
Romario, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning from Bonn. I'm in Germany. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in South Africa, in Durban.
Oh, great. So, Romario, how old are you? And can you tell us a little bit more about you?
My name is Romario Valentine from Durban, South Africa. I am 9 years old, a non-sulfur and an environmentalist. I'm an Ocean Soul ambassador and I've cleaned the beach over 150 times. Last year, I helped 900 endangered birds at Guinea River Bird Park.
Very good. Fantastic. So can you tell us a little bit more about your passion or your contribution to the environment?
I do presentations at school on the environment, and some of my friends help me clean the beach.
All right. I see a nice background behind you. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is it?
The Great Green Wall was headed by the African Union, commenced in 2007, and this is the forest strip of drought-resistant trees. I've done 2 trees of the drought-resistant trees, acacia.
Oh,
and
fantastic.
Also, it's my eco artwork. It also has the acacia has the real thorn. Yeah.
Very good. So, Romario, if you have one question to world leaders about the environment, what would it be?
I am concerned about children going hungry in Africa and birds being extinct. What is the long-term plan to preserve the environment for future generations?
That's a great question. Of course, the environment should be there for future generations. It should not be exploited and overexploited by the current generation. Now, the challenge is to find a balance between the need to feed a growing population and the need to conserve the environment. And it is possible because in Africa, we have very talented people like you who are going to make a big change. So the hope is that as the population grows, we will have less impact on the environment so that the trees, the freshwater, lakes, rivers that we have can be protected for future generations.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So what is your next project, Romario? Where are you going next with your notion about the environment and your vision?
I've teamed up with the UNCCD for the certification and job day on the 17th of June. To celebrate my 10th birthday on the 26th of July, I will be doing a campaign for the African grey parrot at Birds of Eden in Cape Town and a reforestation campaign for Zaids Foundation in Kenya. I want to leave a legacy for other children.
This is so inspiring. You are only 9 years old. We are starting this year the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. It means that in the next 10 years, the world should be restoring ecosystems, protecting the environment. All the wild species, nature provides us with the air we breathe, with the water we drink, and with the food we eat. By the end of the decade, you will be 19 years old, and you will be a real adult, now taking care of your environment yourself without the support of anybody. It is inspiring to see people like you, young people like you, caring for the environment, because that is really the future. So you are not only waiting for your future to come, you are actually acting now, and acting with your means, with your drawings, with your paints. So it is so inspiring to have you, and we hope that people around you will understand this, and the message that you are carrying out, more young people will engage to protect the environment, because this is for you. The future is in your hands.
Thank you, sir.
Finland has stepped up to support this World Environment Day, helping to ensure that the message of restoration travels wide and far, so that hundreds of millions of people across the globe, including you, who are watching now, are aware of the enormous opportunities that lie ahead. But efforts for restoration by the country go far beyond this important milestone alone. Please join me in welcoming Finland's Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, Krista Mikkonen.
Finland is a long-standing partner of Unep. In addition to our annual co-contribution to the Environmental Fund, we supported Unep's Healthy and Productive Ecosystems sub-program in 2020 with €3 million. I'm happy to see this being used to launch the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration. The need to restore damaged ecosystems is urgent. Only with healthy ecosystems can we stop the loss of biodiversity and secure life on Earth. We need to take action both locally and globally. As major tools for the global and EU restoration targets, Finland has two programs: the Forest Biodiversity Programme Metso and the Habitats Programme Helmi. Before year 2030, we will restore and manage 60,000 hectares of meadows, 700 sites of aquatic bird habitats, 52,000 hectares of semi-natural grasslands, over 1,700 sites of forest habitats, and over 1,500 sites of freshwater and coastal habitats. We are committed to the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, underlining the need for urgent action to mainstream biodiversity into all sectors. This decade, let us restore ecosystems together.
Biodiversity is the number and variety of all living things on Earth, from the tiniest microbes to us humans and all the animals and plants we share this planet with. Biodiversity is the basis for all our lives, the water we drink and the food we eat. How much of it we're going to protect and save is a fundamental question for our own future and for the coming generations. Now please help me welcome to the Generation Restoration Dialogue on Biodiversity, UN Environment Programme Young Champion of the Earth, Nerea Alicia Garcia, and the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biodiversity, Elizabeth Marema.
Nerea, it's such an honor and privilege today to connect with you directly. I've seen your work and I really wish you the best, because those are the demonstrations, those are the best practices which we really want the world to see and emulate, with the hope that each bit and piece of our work will make a difference globally.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And like I shared with you before, we couldn't do this work if we didn't have elders in the movement who were, bushwhacking the way for us to follow. So I just want to again express what an honor it is to be speaking with you this morning.
For me, I would really be interested to learn from you. What actually pushed you into what you are doing?
Thank you. That's such a great question. And it really just allows me to share a little bit more about how important intergenerational collaboration is. In the Winnemem Wintu prophecy, they believe that when the salmon are gone, so will the Winnemem Wintu people. The way that prophecy speaks to me as a Indigenous woman living on someone else's territory is that really just means that there won't be any more people, period. I prayed about it when I was really coming out of school, that the Creator could lead me towards elders who are doing this work. And then came Chief Colleen Sisk. It is no coincidence, I believe, that our ancestors have sent us here to look towards the next 500 years and ask ourselves, what does our generation need to do now to ensure that we can continue to live, not just as human beings, but as human beings that are a part of a larger web of life. And you see the Winnemem Wintu, they have not forgotten that their closest relative who they must honor their covenant to is the salmon. For me, as an Indigenous person from Mexico, my closest relation is the corn. And everybody in the world at some point had that memory of who we were related to and what part of the web we were on. I've been so moved by so many other Indigenous leaders from around the world who are feeling this spiritual call to come and reawaken that ancestral memory for all of human beings and say, hey, it's time for us to really question the way that we're living and make sure that we're not driving ourselves into our own extinction. I'm curious what your vision for how you in this role can support young people who are on the ground trying to make meaningful work in their communities.
Of course, I'm only an individual, but of course, our support is beyond myself with my team, but also with the parties to the convention who are actually are the ones who negotiate, take decisions. But I think for the youth, unless measures, actions take place actually today, not tomorrow, we have lost decades on land sea use change, climate change, pollution, invasive species, overexploitation of natural resources as direct drivers of biodiversity loss. All these challenges, if actions is not taken rather today, then indeed your generation and your children will have no planet to inherit. But me and you, our choices also need to change. What we consume, what we eat in our daily diets, and all the waste which we contribute to. We also need all stakeholders to be involved in whatever actions. It's not just, as we talked here, youth, indigenous peoples and local communities. We need the finance. We need the business sector. We need the women, because each one has a different action and contribution to that sustainable development. When we talk of finance, we need the banks, for instance, to finance nature positive activities and not the unsustainable incentives, for instance. So we need them on board. We need the industrial production to change its operations. We need them on board. So we need all these actors to play different roles to really help us to change these statistics. And scientists have been very clear, this is our last chance.
So I'm wondering, what is the Convention on Biological Diversity's role in the next 10 years?
I said, where policies are put in place, management conservation are put in place, but not just put in place on the paper, but they are also implemented. Progress has been made. We have made progress on deforestation. We have made progress on invasive alien species. We have also made progress on the species extinction. So what do we need to do? We know the problems. We know what needs to be done. We need the will to do it. You see, ecosystem issues, biodiversity loss issues, climate change are not issues of environment. They are social, they are developmental, they are healthy problems. So they cannot be dealt with by one ministry. We need all of society, whole of government, mainstreaming these issues into all sectors for any action to take place.
What are some successful stories that can, be something that can, uplift my spirit this morning?
So your project, your campaign is one of those. But what we need is to upscale them.
Yes.
So that they do not remain at local level, but they become national, regional, and even globally, because others then can learn from that.
That's so beautiful that you say that, because we were thinking about how beautiful it would be for people from all over the world to see the power of what action rooted in culture could look like, and that it can make a difference.
Thank you very much. Learned a lot, and I'm sure this will not be our first and the last, but only the first of the many conversation.
It was such an honor to speak with you this morning, and I hope this is one of many conversations that we will have, and that the next time we talk, we can talk about successful indicators, and I can give you updates about how we are doing with the restoration of the salmon for the Winnemem-Wintu people.
Looking forward. Thank you very much.
The recently launched report, Becoming Generation Restoration, shows that restoration is not only urgently needed for the environment, but also for economic stability. The cost of inaction is greater than the cost of restoration. Around $10 trillion in global gross domestic product could be lost by 2050 if ecosystem services continue to decline. So clearly, businesses and companies should have an interest in reviving our planet, right? Let's hear what companies are planning to turn things around from the CEO of E.ON, one of Europe's largest energy suppliers, Dr. Leonhard Birnbaum.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to speak to you for E.ON as one of a few exclusive partners of the United Nations Environment Programme to support the decade on ecosystem restoration. For us as an energy company, decarbonizing the energy sector is one key to fight climate change. But we also know by protecting our ecosystems as the planet's carbon sinks, we can fight climate change from another angle as well. E.ON is the largest distribution system operator in Europe. this is an opportunity to contribute even further. Therefore, I am proud to announce that we have started an investment initiative to establish rich ecosystems along 13,000 kilometers of our overhead power lines across Europe. With climate change and degrading ecosystems, we have tremendous challenges ahead of us. But we believe in the power of the many. We therefore invite our customers, suppliers, and partners to help us to prevent, halt, and reverse the destruction of natural spaces together with us. And with this, I give the word back, and I wish all of us a good start into the decade on ecosystem restoration. Thank you.
We've heard a lot from political leaders, those in the investment space, and the role of international organisations. But it's important to remember, restoring a planet across billions of hectares on every continent and ocean is a task far too daunting for any one entity to lead. It takes a movement. It takes all of us. It takes you and me. But how do you build a movement? Well, I had the privilege of sitting down with some exceptional and inspirational people, each leading a movement in their own way, be it in local communities, in science, arts, or the rights of indigenous and marginalised people. Join me in listening to their wisdom and being inspired by their action. Well, if we want to learn about how to build a restoration movement, I've got some fantastic people to speak to. They're going to give us their perspectives from a science, from an art and a community activism perspective. I want to start with you, Louise. You've been working in the Philippines for some time. From your perspective as a chef and a farmer, that's how you came to better understand the chef-farmer-supplier relationship. And that led you to investigating the role of food and food systems and societal change. Is that right?
Oh, definitely. I mean, when I was working as a chef, I realized that there were major gaps in our food systems where our consumers were very much alienated from producers. And I realized that there was something that we needed to do. And I started it off as an advocacy of farm-to-table food. And I realized that that was kind of just one aspect of our food systems. And eventually it became helping farmers on the ground, especially after the effects of massive typhoons on my town. So that was kind of the very core of what we were doing and what our work was to kind of address that issue and create meaningful systemic change within our food systems by empowering farmers and giving them better resources and tools to better position them for sustainable success.
Thanks, Louise. I want to come back to you to pick that up. I want to get through everyone else as well. Jordan, you are a poet, you're an activist. Tell us about how you got involved in climate activism.
Yeah, definitely. I consider myself to be a very sensitive person, so I don't think I'm made to be in the front line of protest, but I am passionate about writing. And I thought, as long as I'm using my talents for something for good, then I'm taking a step in the right direction. That's when I started writing poetry about all the issues in my community, especially climate change. Being from New York City, we're right on the water, and I could see the effects of climate change every day.
Thank you. I want to wind back a bit and bring Tom in from the science perspective. We're talking about a movement for restoration. We're launching the decade of ecosystem restoration, Tom. So I guess a question I should really ask is, what is restoration? What does it involve?
Restoration is so many things. I think one big misconception in the media often is that restoration is just planting trees, loads and loads of trees. And that is not what it's about. Restoration is about creating a world in which nature can flourish in a way that it supports local communities and people around the world. So the key to successful restoration in every possible case is finding the economic incentives, as Louise was mentioning, once you find the economic incentives to bring back biodiversity, whether it's, putting the beehives higher up in trees so that honey badgers don't get them, or if it's integrating different tree species in your agroforestry system so that you get better yields, whatever it is, integrating that biodiversity, bringing economic benefits, that's when nature becomes economically sustainable. All of those activities fall under the umbrella of restoration. And so what we're aiming for is restoring the global ecosystems.
Yeah, thanks so much. So much to pick up from all of you. Xiye, going to bring you in here. We're talking about communities around the world. And of course, it is the greater risk to frontline communities, indigenous communities, and your work centers around that, because overwhelmingly, these are communities of color.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a conversation that we hadn't really had in the environmental movement until very recently. We had always seen the climate movement as being about the Arctic, the Antarctic, maybe some coral reef acidification, or things that weren't close to home. And I think that the way in which we get people to care about the climate crisis is to show them that it's actually affecting their communities and their well-being, their physical and their mental health. I think that one of the challenges that we have in the environmental and climate activism community is that it's just not accessible for everyone. And the thing with the climate movement is that we need everyone. I don't want climate activism to continue being called climate activism. I just want it to be our way of life. I want it to be our culture to take care of the world. And that's why I also think it's so important to include indigenous philosophy into our activism, because it's not only about supporting indigenous communities, but realizing that they have the knowledge and the skills to be part of the solution. So when we talk about restoration, it's not only planting 1 trillion trees, but planting 1 trillion trees that are native to where they're at. Like Thomas was saying before, it's about empowering communities to rewild their ecosystems, their own communities. An indigenous saying that I love says, we have to do all of our actions thinking about the wisdom of the past 7 generations and the stability of the future 7 generations.
Well, that I had to skip a beat then to absorb that. That's quite saying, and that there is wisdom in that statement too. You mentioned about making this part of our everyday culture. There is a sense that that wave is coming in, isn't there, guys? I mean, I want to throw this out to all of you, because that is how we're going to create a real movement. When we talk about a movement, it really is about that wave of change. It's everyone getting involved from a small scale to larger scales. Jordan, let's start with you. I want everyone to just weigh in after Jordan speaks. I don't need to ask you, but Jordan, poetry, art, this needs to be a part of our culture, right?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think art and social justice go hand in hand. We've seen it several times in history before with the Harlem Renaissance, Black communities really finding joy in art, finding each other in art. And we could kind of learn from that when it comes to climate action, climate justice. As we mentioned earlier, making information accessible is probably one of the most important things. And a lot of science statistics can really feel overwhelming. And I really love to make people aware of the fact that it's not about the birds, the bees, or Florida's orange trees. It's all about people. It's always been about people. It will always be about people.
I just think it's so insanely inspiring to see, this panel and the heroes that we've got spreading this word. What's so scary is that it's so easy to misinterpret or get the wrong message. And so many times we've seen people, companies or governments, getting the wrong idea about things like restoration and just going, right, we'll put a monoculture of trees that destroys the ecosystem and ruins the biodiversity. And it's so exciting to see the sort of climate heroes now all having the same narrative. It's all about communities, it's all about people, it's all about biodiversity, it's all about integrating sort of natural ecosystems into our livelihoods. And I think it's insanely exciting, I think.
I want to ask all of you then about how we translate that message to people. How do we go from, experts in pockets working in the areas and fields that you're working in to the average person and somewhere else in the world? How do we translate that message?
Definitely, that's a really important question now. I think Well, considering all of us here on the panel are still quite young, we didn't start off as experts. We started off as people who found a cause that we cared about enough that we wanted to do something about it, and we couldn't settle or just ignore the fact that this was happening. For us, I think it kind of started off, like for at least Xiye and I, that we started local. We started with the movements within our communities and within our surroundings because we understood it best, and we wanted to build awareness for what was going on within our communities. There's so many opportunities. If you see a gap or a crisis or a problem, it means that there's an opportunity for change, and there's an opportunity to step forward and make that niche and find that change. So that's a piece of advice I would give to people watching.
Well, the first thing I would say is that if you're watching this, you already took the first step, right? So now that you're here, now that you're listening to us, now that you're connecting with the fact that the climate crisis is an issue that touches upon every single aspect, which means that whatever your passion is, you can do it through a climate lens, which is what Jordan was talking about. You know, use your skills and your passion to be part of the solution. And I want to echo what Louise said as well. You know, we all started like as students who were interested about this topic. We all started small. We all started, you know, putting posters on our school bathrooms about a protest, and I ended up organizing over 300,000 people in New York City after having been an organizer for 4 months. So things grow exponentially, especially when people care about what's going on. And I promise you that people care about the climate crisis, like you care about the climate crisis because you're watching this. So the last thing I would say is that we really need to make this movement intergenerational. I heard something really special one time, which is every time you do something, hold the hand of somebody older and the hand of somebody younger, because it is imperative that us as the new generation that is coming in with climate solutions, with a mentality of climate justice, that we influence older generations who are in positions of power, but also influence the upcoming generations so that they can know how to live their life through a climate solutions lens.
Okay, well, Tom Crowther, Louise Mabulo, Jordan Sanchez, and Xiye Bastida, thanks so much for speaking to me and sharing your expertise with everyone watching. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Now, let me hand over to a woman whose words are so much more powerful than mine could ever be. Jordan Sanchez is from the Bronx with roots in Puerto Rico, Congo, and Togo. She's a poet, climate change activist, and studies physics at Harvard, and she is only 19. Let her words move you like they moved me. Here's Jordan's curtain raiser poem that she penned for World Environment Day 2021.
Have you ever seen time fly? Watch it slip through your fingers like a cloud passing by. Too slow to notice it leaving, too fast to make it stop. All we've known is to destroy like it's breathing. The pitter-patter of raindrops match the sounds of clocks tick, counting down. Tick, tick. How lucky we are to live. We are a fraction of a second in Earth's lifetime, yet she is our only lifeline. Resilient, we stand on our own 2 feet. I'll tell you, reimagining the future has never tasted so sweet. Like nectar to a bee, honey to a home. No one can do this alone. Tick. The promise of restoration lives within us. We see her in the hues of the youth, and she's asking you, what will you stand for? Now is the time for our regeneration.
It is such an honor to introduce 2 truly incredible leaders who both have a long legacy in protecting what we have left and aiming to bring back what has been damaged. Unep's Executive Director, Inga Andersen, and UN Messenger of Peace, Dr. Jane Goodall.
Me, Jane.
Me, Inger. Well, Jane, you are such an inspiration to so many across the world, and we are eternally in your debt for all the work that you're doing. And now you have agreed to speak to us here at Unep for the World Environment Day. And it would be really interesting to hear, as we are trying to mount this global campaign, your thoughts on ecosystem restoration.
So it all started in 1986 at a conference which was meant to be just about chimp behavior and how it differed in different places. But we had a session on conservation, and it was shocking. I mean, I knew there was deforestation, but to see the different scientists in 7 different parts of Africa showing chimpanzee numbers decreasing and forests vanishing. So I thought, well, I better find out more about the threats to the chimps. So I managed to get to 6 of the different field study sites. And I learned a lot about the problems faced by the chimps, but I also learned a lot about the problems faced by so many of the African people living in and around the chimpanzee habitat, the crippling poverty, the lack of good health and education systems, the degradation of the land. And that's when it hit me. If we don't help these people find ways of making a living without destroying their environment, we can't save chimpanzees, forests, or anything else. And so the Jane Goodall Institute began a program called Take Care or Tokari, which is a very holistic program. And it began in the 12 villages around Gombe. And it began with a local team, 6 Tanzanians, and they went and listened to the village elders. What do you think JGI can do for you? And so this program was so successful, it's now in 104 villages throughout the chimpanzee range in Tanzania, and it's in 6 other African countries. And if you fly over Gombe today, there are no more bare hills, and animals are returning, and chimps have a little more space.
You know, your story and the foresightedness with which you engaged back at the time when you began is just so important for people to hear, because we have an opportunity now ahead of us to really try to heal the planet. In Unep, we speak about 3 planetary crises: a crisis of climate, the crisis of biodiversity and nature, and the crisis of pollution and waste. And these 3 are sort of driven by our humans' unsustainable consumption and production. And what you've just described is a big project, but a microcosm of what needs to now be done at the global scale. I think that examples such as this are really fantastic examples to make this global effort. And one of the points that we are trying to see, and it would be interesting to hear your views, is, you know, how can you crowd in financing? How can you crowd in support from governments, from NGOs, from scientists, from indigenous people, from the UN, etc.? And how can you inspire that people understand that this really is the future?
I think if there is a silver lining to this terrible pandemic, it's that more people are realizing we brought it on ourselves by our absolute disrespect of animals and the natural world. More and more people are realizing we truly need a new relationship with animals and with the environment, and a new and more sustainable economy. One of the big problems is that there are leaders in politics and business who can't wait to get back to business as usual, because it's all about making money and gaining power, and not about thinking about the next generation, like the indigenous people. And I personally think if you're talking to a person in a high position, or a group like you're talking about, they don't want statistics, or very few, because they don't really remember them. And I feel it's so important to get to the heart. If somebody is kind of being accusing and saying you ought to do this and you ought to do that, you see them in a way shutting off, because they're now thinking, well, I'm not going to accept that from her. And so they start trying to refute whatever it is you're saying. So they're not really listening, telling stories. And, you know, just from personal experience, what I've seen, what it means. I've seen climate change with my own eyes. I've seen the ice melting in the Greenland ice cliff. And Well, right now there's 7.2 or 3 billion of us on the planet. And already we're using up these finite natural resources in some places, and some of them faster than nature can replenish them. We have to find another way. We have to get together and look at this as a whole. If we don't, then what's it going to be like in 50 years' time? I don't want to think, and I'm glad I won't be here, but I'm going to use the last years of my life fighting to make that change happen somehow.
Well, I think, Jane, the way you have walked into people's hearts and souls is something that is inspirational to the entire world. The Roots and Shoots program that has started across the world with young people getting engaged. So what gives you hope? This will be my last question, because we need hope so that we can continue this important work.
I believe that we have a window of time when if we get together and work together to effect change, then we have a chance of healing some of the harm we've inflicted and at least slowing down climate change and loss of biodiversity. My reasons for hope, first of all, it's the young people. Once they understand the problem and we listen to their voices, they roll up their sleeves and they get out and they take action. They are changing the world. There's absolutely no question. They are changing the world. And so Roots and Shoots, young people, greatest reason for hope. Secondly, this incredible intellect, which separates us more than anything else from the other animals. Think what we've done. I mean, we've designed a rocket that went up to Mars. We've been taking photographs of the surface of the red planet. We're beginning to map the bottom of the ocean. But, you know, science is now beginning to come to grips with the problems, and solar energy, wind energy. We're moving closer to a time when we can stop burning fossil fuels. And finally, there's what I call the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle what seems impossible and won't give up and so often succeed and inspire everybody around them. Because once you have hope, then it's worth taking action. And the more you take action, the more hopeful you are because you see the difference that's being made. And the more you inspire those around you so that they too want to feel hopeful and make a difference, because being without hope is terrible.
I want to thank you for everything that you do and for what you stand for and for your tireless commitment. And with your voice and with the enthusiasm that you inspire in so many people, we thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Inga.
After this amazing programme, where we heard from so many different voices, I'm glad that I have one more highlight in store for you. World famous DJ Don Diablo and international hip-hop star Dolla have joined forces in creating a love song for Mother Earth and a great music video for Generation Restoration. Join me for the world premiere of the song right now and get a sneak peek at first work for the video.
Hey guys, hello fellow Earthlings. My name is Don, aka Don Diablo. Right now I'm in Amsterdam, my hometown, and as an artist I've had the privilege to travel the world over and over again and meet people from all different walks of life, and I know one thing for sure. In the end we all share the same home, our beautiful planet. And that's why I am super excited to join Just Dig It and the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and use my voice and mostly my music to make sure that we start protecting and restoring our precious ecosystems. Together with Dolla, I'm proud to release and bring forth Too Much to Ask as a support track for Just Dig It and the Decade on Ecosystem Restoration to promote solutions and raise funds through streaming, Stream to Regreen. This is definitely a revolution when it comes to music and working on a better future, and I couldn't be more excited. We're going to stream for nature-based solutions. This is the decade of doing. My name is Don Diablo, Just Dig It, United Nations. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
She said she need more loving in the morning, she need more loving in the night. I don't know what to tell her, so I just close my eyes. If you want me to be somebody, I can't just be your somebody. I don't know what to tell her, but this morning shit so hot. Baby, you know that I've been this way from small. Oh, you know me already. Oh, you know me already. You know what you signed up for. But I'm far away from you. It's only you I'm missing. It's only you I'm missing. Baby, is it too much to ask for your love, 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 love? For your love, 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 love. For your love, love, love. Is it too much to ask for your love, 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 love? For your love, 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 love. Is it too much to ask?
Thank you all for joining us for such a monumental event. We hope you've learned more about and been inspired to join the efforts for Generation Restoration to ensure the health and livelihood of our wondrous planet for centuries to come. Well, that will only happen if we take the action we've been discussing today. Head to worldenvironmentday.global and decadeonrestoration.org to learn how you can be the change you want to see for our planet. Let's get to work.